Welcome to the Influential Leadership Learning Set. That's a mouthful for a Scottish person. And this is my first one of 2023. I'm so sorry I'm missing you all today. So today we are going to talk about the power of a peer group for a leader, a peer support leader like yourself. I just want to thank kind of our guest presenter in November who talked about research in your peer leader roles, and we'll be uploading that soon to the website. Of course, we've talked about quiet leadership and maintaining leadership relationships in the past, so this adds to that series. So we are talking about building a peer network for yourself and you as a leader, but it builds on past learning that we've done. And so you may remember back, or you may not have been at this session before, but we talked about mapping out your network. And we won't go into it in deep detail today, but you might find it helpful to go back to that learning moment where we talked about actually writing down who you volunteer with, your past jobs, your current job and your current colleagues, your friends, naming who they are, and your connections to people. It's really, really helpful when you want to think about how you're going to influence, how you're going to spread the word potentially of peer support, or how you're going to build out your own influence and relationships. Actually having a real map really, really helps. So that's a bit of a foundational piece for what we're going to talk about today. So today, simply put, today is all about how to build a posse as a leader. And so this is a bit of an insight into the life that a CEO or a manager leads, and really good ones anyway don't necessarily do everything by themselves. And when I say don't necessarily, I think that there are very few, especially senior leaders, who don't have a wee group, close group of friends, confidants, people going along the same journey as them. They don't have to be besties or go to each other's weddings or anything like that, but they have a group that they share a same purpose with. You know, you often hear about how lonely leaders can be because they're on their own. They have lots of shared accountabilities and responsibilities. And what I would say is you don't really have to be lonely in that role. You may have some sole responsibilities in your own team, your own program, or maybe for your organization if you lead that organization. But that there are lots of people like you with similar responsibilities, similar accountability, similar lived experiences that you can build. So, you know, you can be your ranch gang riding on horseback together to overcome issues. And so I was really specific as well. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're besties with everyone in that group. But of course, you have strong relationships, and the reason you've come together is because you're probably in similar situations and you can relate to one another's, and it's a really good timing. And so today is all about how do you actually build that posse rather than waiting for it to kind of organically happen, because you're more empowered as a leader if you've got that really tight network and tight support group. Before going into any of the other concepts and to the detail of this, I want to let you know as well that my hope is that the International Peer Leadership Network, the bonds that you form here, can absolutely be a part of your posse. Posse is not normally that big, you know, it's not hundreds of members or anything like that, but it might be that you feel a real kind of deep connection with other people in the group. And so of course you might build your posse out to people that you meet here. So why a posse? Why is it important? I think it is fighting that story that I've just talked about, but it is important to kind of acknowledge it. So as leaders, and then the double stigma that we have as folks with lived experience is that we build up a story of our own competence and our leadership abilities, and that story that we can kind of overcome anything under any odds, because that shows our skills and our competence in leadership. And I would argue that's not necessarily a bad thing because it shows your ability to role model and just remain calm. But that may not be how you feel, and that might not be reality either. And so you need close friends, and that doesn't always mean your manager or those above you in the organization or the people that report to you, because that role modeling in your future is important. And so finding a group in which you can actually share the real you. We've got the mask there. You can take the mask down for just a second and actually share with people who you can know and trust. Share, share those worries, share those successes, share those questions. In these peer groups, we can not only be honest, absolutely honest, but more often than not, you do realize that we're not alone. It's not new stuff to any of you, but the intentionality around these groups are really important. And having, I call it a posse because I really do think that it's difficult for these groups to kind of be more than 6 people, 8 people. A posse really can be 3. It's great to have 3 because you've got an observer, rather than just the 2 of you. But at least having 1, 2, 3, we're building kind of communities of practice almost, but specifically around our leadership and the situation that our leadership finds us in. So what do you actually, get out of these, out of your posse that you can share with? Well, it's just lovely to be a part of that group. You also get a bit of situational awareness. We can't hear all feedback from our boss or from our colleagues or from those that report to us sometimes, because just of where we're at, the stressors, the relationships we might feel, but that situational awareness you get from people in your posse who, in your peer leadership group, that, they don't have any skin in the game. They can be honest, they can be your friend. It's easier to hear from them kind of a different perspective on the situation, and it allows us to reflect in a different way. Like I said before, it gives you a chance to actually ask questions that you definitely wouldn't ask to someone senior to you because you're worried of the stigma or kind of that showing that vulnerability that's not always possible in all workplaces. And finally, you get more personal insight into yourselves. We do that through conversations with our colleagues, your friends and peers. So you can you learn. And I suppose the thing that's not in here as well is you get a lot of knowledge from other leaders and how they've solved problems and how you might be able to implement things. And you're in a place where you're normally more open to accepting that knowledge, rather than knowledge being kind of put to you. There's a great concept called mind lines, if anyone wants to Google it, in which doctors, this kind of peer group conversation, this is often where doctors decide that they're going to change practice rather than just kind of going along to training. They'll have conversations with their peer group about new ways of practicing, and they're much more likely to implement if they have the conversations in these peer groups. There are new practice, new ways of doing things than they might do, if a manager comes along or a trainer comes along and says, this is the new way you should be doing things. People don't react often to new ways of doing things that quickly. And they need a peer group like this one like these ones to institute that new practice. So something to think about as well for us as leaders and as peers. There's new ways of doing things. So how do we ensure we've got a peer group to talk new concepts through and forwards? How do you actually do it? How do you actually form your posse, your peer group? And it doesn't have to be as formal as calling it a community practice. No, it's not necessarily about practice, about leadership. It's about lots of different dimensions to you. I think the very first thing is, use that network map that we've talked about in previous learning sessions, and you invite folk. You have to take that risk. We often worry about, folk not showing up to things or people not being committed, and you can be that person that invites people to your group. And of course, people are going to ask, well, what's the purpose? Who's it for? So we've talked through that purpose. The purpose is about, we can have a beginning and a middle and end. Maybe you say, I'd love to meet with you for 4 sessions over the next year. I really want to learn from you and your style. I'd love to ask questions in a way that I'm not comfortable doing that at work. And, I think that would be fun. And I think it would be helpful for my career and the influence I want to have as a peer supporter. And be really specific about who's it for. So it's not, it really like, who do you want to learn from? Because and that can kind of push you outside of your comfort zone. Maybe you invite someone that doesn't necessarily work within your sector or isn't directly related to you in a way that you'll be kind of surprised about how willing people may be to actually be a part of your group if it's a chance for them and their own development. I would always say that food and being strategic with the group too. If there's someone that you've always admired, you might think of a mentor as a mentor. Why, or someone who it would be great to have a relationship with in the future to build your own influence. Why not invite them to your trip? You never know. All they can say is no. And I like meeting over food. So if you can do it in real life, maybe you do meet for lunches. Or if it's online, you can say, bring food to the group. Feel free to eat biscuits and tea while we talk. It brings that casualness and the fact that it's about building relationships and a bit of intimacy with each other as well, so that you do feel comfortable enough to learn and grow. So that purpose is really important. And then the final thing I put in there is feel free to interrupt. It's about holding ourselves to account. We are not sharing our whole life experiences in those groups. And so that was one of the tips I once heard. I really liked. It may not be your style, but if you're worried about someone kind of holding all the space in that group, I would interrupt my friends, if I said, hey, I'd love to contribute here. If you truly are all equals, then it's a great test to see if you're all able to contribute, ask questions, share, and ask questions of each other too, rather than kind of just, it's not just an emotional support group. It absolutely is about building relationships and learning and treating each other and asking expertise from each other too. So that idea of interrupting is okay under circumstances. So it's a great way, I think, to think about it. Okay, final thought. What do you get? And so I think I've already gone through those pieces. But what I do want you to do now is a little task. Take 5 minutes. Feel free to ask one another. But who would you put in your group? So I think about 4 to 5 people, maybe 6 people you invite, with the hope that 3 would come along. Who would you invite to your group? And what would be your primary purpose? Now, you've heard some of the purposes of our groups. What would be your purpose for your local group? It might involve some things that you also want to see in your community too. I hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting.